Welcome back, thanks for tuning into Reddit Cheating Stories. Please subscribe to our channel, thanks. Let's dive in. My name is Alex, and I've always considered myself the responsible child. I'm 32, have a stable job as a software engineer, and I'm generally the one my parents call when they need help with anything tech-related, or just anything, really. My siblings, Liam and Chloe, are, well, let's just say they're more creative and free-spirited. Liam's a struggling musician, perpetually on the verge of his big break, and Chloe bounces between various artistic endeavors and odd jobs, none of which seem to stick. Growing up, it was always Alex to the rescue. When Liam's guitar amp blew up before a crucial gig, I was the one who spent hours online finding a replacement and driving 2 hours to pick it up. When Chloe needed bail money after an unfortunate incident involving spray paint and a public statue, guess who got the call? Even though I knew they were adults now, it felt like they were still kids. Our parents, bless their hearts, always tried to be fair. They paid for all of us to go to college, and always made sure each of us had nice birthday gift and special things. To me, growing up, I always felt like we were a family. My parents, David and Susan, live in the house I grew up in, a charming Victorian with a sprawling garden that Susan meticulously tends to. They're both retired now, David from his accounting firm and Susan from her teaching job. They were always relatively comfortable, not rich by any stretch, but they owned their house outright and had decent savings. Recently, they'd been acting strange. Secretive phone calls, hushed conversations when I visited, and a general air of discomfort that hung in the air like a persistent fog. I tried to brush it off, figuring it was just old people stuff, but a nagging feeling gnawed at the back of my mind. Then came the call. "Alex, darling," my mother chirped, her voice a little too bright. "Could you come over on Saturday? We have something important to discuss." "All of you, actually." "All of us?" I asked, a knot tightening in my stomach. "Is everything okay?" "Oh, everything's fine, dear," she said, a little too quickly. "Just a family matter. We want everyone together here at." That was enough to set off alarm bells. The fact that both Liam and Chloe were also invited meant this was serious. I spent the rest of the week in a state of low-grade anxiety, running through a mental checklist of potential disasters. Were they moving? Were they sick? Had they finally decided to sell the house? The bombshell. Saturday arrived, gray and gloomy, reflecting my mood perfectly. I arrived at my parents' house just as Liam was pulling up in his beat-up van, his latest band poster plastered on the side. Chloe was already there, sporting a vibrant purple hairstyle and a collection of mismatched earrings. The house was filled with the smell of Mom's cooking, which was usually comforting, but today it just felt ominous. The four of us sat in the living room, the air thick with anticipation. My parents sat on the floral-patterned sofa, holding hands, their faces unusually serious. My father cleared his throat, a sound that echoed in the otherwise silent room. "So," he began, his voice a little shaky. "Your mother and I have something important to tell you all. We've updated our will." "Okay, here it comes," I thought. "Time for the bad news. We've been working with our lawyer," he continued, "to ensure that everything is settled according to our wishes. And after a lot of consideration, we've made some decisions." He paused, glancing nervously at my mother, who squeezed his hand reassuringly. "We've decided that when we pass, the entirety of our estate, the house, our savings, everything, will be divided equally between Liam and Chloe." The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at my father, my mind struggling to process the words I had just heard. "Wait," I finally managed to stammer. "What do you mean? What about me?" My mother sighed, a pained expression on her face. "Alex, darling, this wasn't an easy decision. But we believe it's the right one." "The right one? How can it be the right one? I understand if you cut me out, but why did you bring me here just to tell me this?" I fought to keep my voice level, but a tremor betrayed my rising anger. "I've always been there for you both. I've always been responsible. I don't understand." Liam and Chloe, to their credit, looked as shocked as I felt. Liam opened his mouth to say something, but my father cut him off. "Alex," he said, his voice firm. "You're financially secure. You have a good job, a nice apartment. Liam and Chloe, they need the help more. So, because I'm responsible and successful, I get punished. I retorted. That's insane. It's not a punishment, Alex, my mother said softly. It's a recognition of your abilities. You don't need our help. Liam and Chloe do. But I'm still your child. I exclaimed, my voice rising. Don't I deserve something? Anything? Of course, you do, Alex, my father said. You have our love. I scoffed. Love doesn't pay the bills, Dad. The argument escalated from there. I accused them of favoritism, of undervaluing my contributions to the family, of rewarding Liam and Chloe for their irresponsible behavior. My parents defended their decision, arguing that they were simply trying to provide for their children who needed it most. Liam and Chloe sat there, looking increasingly uncomfortable, occasionally offering weak protests, but mostly staying out of the crossfire. I left the house that day feeling betrayed, hurt, and utterly bewildered. How could my parents do this? How could they so blatantly favor my siblings over me, simply because I was the responsible one? The aftermath. The following weeks were a blur of anger, confusion, and sleepless nights. I replayed the conversation in my head 1,000 times, each time finding new reasons to be furious. I couldn't understand their logic. Was I being greedy? Was I wrong in feeling entitled to a share of their estate? I tried talking to my friends about it, but most of them didn't know what to say. Some offered platitudes about family and forgiveness, while others simply agreed that it was unfair. None of it made me feel any better. My relationship with my parents became strained and distant. I avoided their calls, and when I did speak to them, our conversations were stilted and awkward. I couldn't shake the feeling that they had betrayed me, that they didn't value me as much as they valued my siblings. My relationship with Liam and Chloe was even more complicated. They both seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the situation, but neither of them offered to relinquish their inheritance. Liam mumbled something about needing the money for his music, and Chloe vaguely mentioned plans to open an art studio. I couldn't bring myself to hate them, but I couldn't help feeling resentful. They were about to receive a windfall that they hadn't earned, while I, who had always worked hard and been responsible, was left with nothing. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day at work, I found myself scrolling through online forums for advice on inheritance disputes. I knew it was probably a long shot, but I was desperate for some kind of recourse. That's when I stumbled across a thread discussing undue influence in wills. The more I read, the more intrigued I became. Undue influence, as I understood it, was when someone manipulated or coerced a person into changing their will against their true wishes. It seemed like a long shot, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about my parents' decision. They had always been so fair, so equitable. Why would they suddenly make such a drastic and seemingly illogical decision? The investigation. I decided to do some digging. I started by talking to my aunt, my mother's sister, who had always been close to our family. At first, she was reluctant to discuss the will, but after a bit of persuasion, she admitted that she was also surprised by my parents' decision. I don't understand it, Alex, she said, shaking her head. Your parents always seemed so proud of you. It doesn't make sense that they would leave you out. She also mentioned that Liam and Chloe had been spending a lot more time with my parents in the months leading up to the will update. They were always over there, helping with the garden, running errands, just generally being around, she said. It was nice to see them being so involved, but I don't know, it felt a little calculated. That was enough to pique my interest. I started paying closer attention to Liam and Chloe's interactions with my parents. I noticed that they were constantly showering them with compliments, praising their cooking, their gardening, their general awesomeness. They were also subtly playing on their emotions, hinting at their financial struggles and their dreams that were just out of reach. One day, I overheard a conversation between Chloe and my mother while I was visiting. Chloe was talking about how she was struggling to make ends meet, how she was working multiple jobs just to pay the rent, and how she was starting to lose hope of ever pursuing her art. "Oh, Chloe, darling," my mother said, her voice filled with sympathy. "You deserve so much better. You're so talented, so creative. It breaks my heart to see you struggling like this." Chloe smiled sweetly. "I know, Mom. But I'll keep trying. I just wish I had a little bit of help, a little bit of a break." It was subtle, but it was there. Chloe was playing the victim, appealing to my mother's emotions, and subtly hinting at her need for financial assistance. I realized that Liam and Chloe weren't just spending more time with my parents, they were actively manipulating them. They were playing on their emotions, exploiting their generosity, and subtly influencing their decisions. The confrontation. Armed with my suspicions, I decided to confront Liam and Chloe. I invited them to a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between my apartment and their respective residences. "I know what you guys are doing," I said, cutting straight to the chase. Liam choked on his latte. "What are you talking about, Alex?" "Don't play dumb," I said, my voice hard. "I know you've been manipulating Mom and Dad. I know you've been playing on their emotions to get them to change their will." Chloe rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Alex. You're being paranoid. We're just spending time with our parents. Spending time with them while subtly hinting at your financial struggles and your unfulfilled dreams," I retorted. "That's not spending time, that's manipulation." Liam and Chloe exchanged nervous glances. "Okay, maybe we've mentioned our struggles," Liam admitted. "But we didn't ask them to change their will. That was their decision." "But you knew it would influence them," I said. "You knew they would feel guilty and want to help you. So what if we did?" Chloe said, her voice defiant. "We need the money more than you do. You're already successful." "That's not the point," I said, my anger rising. "The point is that you manipulated our parents. You took advantage of their generosity and their love for us." The argument escalated from there. Liam and Chloe defended their actions, arguing that they were simply trying to survive. I accused them of being selfish and manipulative. The conversation ended with all of us storming out of the coffee shop, angrier than ever. The twist. Despite the heated confrontation, I still felt uneasy. I knew Liam and Chloe were manipulative, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the story. Why would my parents so drastically change their will without even discussing it with me? It just didn't make sense. I decided to go back to my parents' house and confront them directly. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. When I arrived, my parents were in the garden, tending to their roses. They looked surprised to see me, and a little apprehensive. "Alex, darling," my mother said, her voice hesitant. "What are you doing here?" "I need to know the truth," I said, my voice firm. "Why did you change your will? Why did you leave everything to Liam and Chloe?" My parents exchanged nervous glances. "We told you, Alex," my father said. "They need the help more than you do." "That's not good enough," I said. "There's more to it than that. I can feel it." My mother sighed. "Okay, Alex," she said. "There is something else. But you have to promise not to get angry." I frowned. "I can't promise that. But I promise to listen." My parents led me into the house and sat me down at the kitchen table. They took a deep breath and began to explain. "A few months ago," my mother said, "we received some unexpected news." "What kind of news?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "We found out that we're not your biological parents," my father said, his voice barely a whisper. I stared at him, my mind reeling. "What?" I managed to choke out. "That's impossible." "It's true, Alex," my mother said, tears welling up in her eyes. "When you were born, there was a mix-up at the hospital. You were accidentally switched with another baby. And you only found out now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We received an anonymous letter a few months ago," my father said. "It contained information that only your biological parents would know. We did some research, and it turned out to be true." I sat there, stunned, trying to process the information. I wasn't their biological child. My entire life had been a lie. "So, you're leaving everything to Liam and Chloe because they're your only biological children?" I asked, my voice bitter. "No, Alex," my mother said, shaking her head. "That's not it at all. We still love you, Alex. You're still our son. But you're not leaving me anything," I pointed out. "We wanted to find your biological family and help them," my father tried to explain. "But that wasn't possible. We also thought that because you are well off and secure that you would want us to give what we have to Liam and Chloe. So, your solution is to disinherit me and give everything to my siblings? I asked, my voice rising. That's not fair. That's not right. We know it's not fair, Alex, my mother said, her voice pleading. But we don't know what else to do. We feel so guilty, so confused. I stood up from the table, my head spinning. I need to leave, I said. I can't deal with this right now. I walked out of the house, leaving my parents sitting at the kitchen table, their faces etched with guilt and sorrow. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with questions and emotions. The search for the truth. After finding out that my parents weren't my biological parents, I knew I needed to find my biological family. I wanted to know who they were, where they were, and why they hadn't tried to find me sooner. My parents tried to dissuade me from searching for my biological family, worried about the emotional toll it would take on me. But I was determined. I needed to know the truth. I started by contacting the hospital where I was born. I explained my situation and asked if they had any records of the mix-up. Unfortunately, due to privacy laws, they couldn't release any information without a court order. I hired a lawyer to help me obtain the necessary court order. It took several weeks, but eventually, we were able to get the records. The records confirmed that I had been switched with another baby at birth. The other baby's name was Daniel. The records also contained the names and addresses of Daniel's biological parents, the Millers. I looked them up online and found that they lived in a small town a few hours away from my city. I hesitated for a long time before contacting the Millers. I didn't know what to expect. Would they be happy to hear from me? Would they reject me? Would they even believe my story? Finally, after weeks of agonizing, I decided to call them. I took a deep breath and dialed their number. A woman answered the phone, her voice warm and friendly. Hello, this is Susan Miller speaking. Hello, Mrs. Miller, I said, my voice trembling. My name is Alex. I have something important to tell you. I explained my situation, telling her about the mix-up at the hospital and how I had recently discovered that I wasn't my parents' biological child. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I thought she had hung up. I don't know what to say, she finally said, her voice choked with emotion. This is unbelievable. I know, I said. It's a lot to take in. We always knew something was wrong, she said. Daniel never seemed like he belonged with us. He was always so different from us, so distant. I understand, I said. I felt the same way with my parents. We tried to find you, she said, her voice breaking. We hired private investigators, but they couldn't find any trace of you. I'm here now, I said. I want to meet you. I want to get to know you. We want to meet you too, she said. When can you come? Meeting my biological family. A few days later, I drove to the small town where the Millers lived. I was nervous and excited, unsure of what to expect. When I arrived at their house, a cozy bungalow with a well-manicured lawn, Susan and her husband, Tom, were waiting for me on the porch. They rushed towards me, their faces beaming with joy. Alex, Susan said, her voice filled with emotion. It's so good to finally meet you. It's good to meet you too, I said, my eyes filling with tears. They hugged me tightly, and I felt a sense of belonging that I had never felt before. We spent the day talking, sharing stories, and getting to know each other. I learned that the Millers were simple, hard-working people. Tom was a retired carpenter, and Susan was a homemaker. They had always dreamed of having a big family, but they had only been able to have one child, Daniel. They told me about Daniel, how he was a talented artist but struggled with mental health issues. They loved him dearly, but they had always felt a disconnect with him. As I spent time with the Millers, I realized that I felt more comfortable and at ease with them than I had ever felt with my adoptive parents. We shared the same sense of humor, the same values, and the same interests. It was as if I had finally found my place in the world. The truth about Daniel. During my visit with the Millers, I learned that Daniel had been struggling with some serious issues. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia a few years earlier, and he had been in and out of mental hospitals ever since. The Millers were heartbroken by Daniel's condition, but they were doing everything they could to support him. They visited him regularly, made sure he had access to the best medical care, and provided him with a loving and supportive environment. I asked the Millers if I could meet Daniel. They were hesitant at first, worried about how he would react to the news that he had been switched at birth. But eventually, they agreed. We visited Daniel at the mental hospital where he was staying. He was sitting in the common room, staring blankly at the television. "Daniel," Susan said, her voice gentle. "We have someone we want you to meet." Daniel turned to look at us, his eyes vacant and unfocused. "This is Alex," Susan said. He's your biological brother." Daniel stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. "Alex," he said, his voice raspy. "I've been waiting for you." I was taken aback by his response. "You have?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "I always knew something was wrong. I never felt like I belonged with them." He gestured towards the Millers. I sat down next to Daniel and we started talking. He told me about his struggles with schizophrenia, about his hallucinations and delusions, about the medications he was taking. I listened patiently, trying to understand what he was going through. I realized that Daniel was a complex and troubled person, but he was also kind and intelligent. As I spent time with Daniel, I felt a growing sense of compassion for him. I realized that he had been dealt a difficult hand in life, and he was doing the best he could to cope. The revelation about the will too. I knew I needed to talk to Daniel and see the will for myself and to get an understanding of what my bio parents truly felt. A few days later, I visited Daniel at the mental hospital. As he could not make sound decisions on his own regarding legal documents, I had to have his mom and dad there with me. "Daniel," I said, "I wanted to ask you about something important." "What is it?" he asked, his voice flat. "It's about my adoptive parents' will," I said. "They've decided to leave everything to my siblings, Liam and Chloe." Daniel's eyes widened. "What? That's not fair." "I know," I said. "But they say it's because Liam and Chloe need the money more than I do." "That's ridiculous," Daniel said. "They should be leaving it to you. You're their son." "Well, I am their son and that is what I'm fighting for now," I explained. "I'm working on finding out if someone had undue influence on my parents." "Did you know anything about this to your understanding?" Daniel paused and said, "You know, they did tell me that you were set. That you didn't need help. That they wanted what's best for us now." "Best for us, meaning Liam and Chloe?" "Yes," said Daniel. "Well, would you be okay with fighting with me on this?" I pleaded with Daniel. Yes, I would." I was extremely happy with his response and proceeded to the next step. I went back to talk to my parents, who were relieved that Daniel was willing to fight with me. "We have Daniel's support. Are you willing to show me the will?" They were hesitant and not willing to do so. I proceeded to give them the reasons on to show them the document. I fought tooth and nail and eventually convinced my adoptive parents to show me the will. As they displayed the document to me, I knew something was wrong. There was language in there that would never come out of my adoptive parents. I knew that there was something wrong. "Mom, did you write this document?" I inquired. "Yes, I did." "But you wrote this with outside coercion and undue influence, did you not?" Looking shocked and appalled, I was able to show her how Chloe and Liam have been changing her mind without her even realizing. I told them to rewrite the will with the help of me and Daniel. The resolution. After much discussion and deliberation, my adoptive parents agreed to rewrite the will. They realized that they had been manipulated by Liam and Chloe, and that they had unfairly excluded me from their estate. My adoptive parents showed me the new will they had rewrote and included myself, Daniel, Liam and Chloe. Each of us were able to feel satisfaction and resolve the issue. With all that being said, I knew that I needed to make amends with Liam and Chloe. I invited them to my home. "Listen, I know that there's been tension between us. But hear me out, no matter what our parents or biological situations is, we are still family and I still love you. Fighting over assets is the most useless thing we can do and wanted to apologize for my actions." Liam and Chloe were in tears for it, they were glad that I finally came to my senses. Although this situation was difficult and very convoluted, it was a great lesson in family. It was a great reminder that family is number one and a strong resolution over the course of this tough issue. That's it for today's story. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on more amazing content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.